Hi, folks. With us today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a movie I recently saw. It's a movie, I suppose it's 15 years old, I guess. But I was, as I am with most movies that are done by activists, uh, was concerned about the efforts they go to portray white people and white society as endemically racist, who hate black people only because they're black and for no other reason, just the colour of the skin. Now, there's a real shortage of actual racism in certainly from white society at least. Now, are there concerns that white people have about the behaviour of other races or the behaviour of black people? Sure, and I've seen that quite often. But in my own life, and I'm heading for 6 decades now, I haven't seen really any, none that I can think of, any example of where a white person had something against a black person solely on the skin colour. It's always been related to behaviour. Um, and they've had a problem with the behaviour, and as that behaviour is typical of um, black people, or certainly black people I've encountered, then it's an issue to do with behaviour and not to do with race. The idea that it's been flipped on its head and goes, it's nothing to do with behaviour, it's just a racist thing, that's absolute nonsense. It's a total, horrible, grotesque untruth, and we all need to push back against it. But Hollywood is shot through with these sorts of narratives, and they stick to it, with the evangelical zeal, and they just won't let it go. And they'll just invent the evidence, invent the narrative to support their position. Now, this movie, I could have examined very important issues, in my view, about due legal process. Now, I think any functioning civis, any functioning society, needs to spend a lot of time making sure that due legal process in courts of law is absolutely sacrosanct. That it's not some little silly political tool to be thrown around or ideological tool to be thrown around. It must be and seen to be functioning at the top level all the time. It can't be disregarded just because you want to get someone you don't like them or stick it up your political opponents, which is certainly the case today in the United States and indeed elsewhere around the Western world. Due legal process is seen by the globalists as an obstacle to them taking control, and so they're more than happy to dispense with it. Rather than teaching young people and children, or black people for that matter, that it's all these evil Hitler, Nazi, racist, fascist, white supremacist racists. They're everywhere, and they're evil Hitler. Rather than teaching them that, which is an utter invention, why not teach people about due legal process and the importance of getting that 100% accurate? But no, this movie could have investigated that, but instead they just went straight down the path of evil white racists, um, and I think let us all down in the process. But it's very Hollywood. Now, the movie was produced by a bunch of Jewish activists. I'm sure that's just pure coincidence, and who've got a history of doing this. All white Gentiles are racists and hate blacks. They've got quite a long history of that, this group. Now, you kind of sort of figured it, because when you look at the scripting and the production and directing crew on this movie, there's only one, out of 19 people, there's one guy who isn't Jewish. He's a black activist. So now, it doesn't take much to just get online and have a look. And here's these strident activists. They've got their Twitter pages and YouTube pages where they're ranting about how evil white people are and how they're all racists and white supremacists and Nazis and fascists. And you can't read a paragraph of what these people write without seeing Nazi or fascist in it, or white supremacist, or sometimes all three. So they're hardly an impartial outfit that are setting out. Their purpose is not to entertain. Their purpose is not to produce any sort of accurate depiction or to investigate important issues such as due legal process, which in this case, by the way, did not function. To what extent they even mention due legal process. In fact, they don't mention it. They just go straight for the racism thing. And all the white people are represented in caricature in the movie. They're all insane off the planet, anti-black racists. That without reason or cause, they just hate black people because they hate black people. And again, I've never met anyone in my life. I don't doubt that they must exist somewhere. I mean, if you look long enough and hard enough, you're going to find them. As you would, by the way, black people who hate white people just because they're white. I suspect you'd find more of those than you would of the other. But anyway, so there's a black guy who's been wrongly imprisoned, and the movie is meant to be about that, but again, they don't touch it. It's just about racism and the injustice that white people inflict on black people, according to the activist Jewish writers of the movie. So I guess just looking at the main character, it's actually about a real character from the 1960s and or early 1970s, I guess. And in the movie, they present him as beautifully well dressed and turned out, manicured. He's urbane. He's very well spoken. Obviously, he's got an IQ of 2 million. He's a smart guy. I mean, he looks and sounds like the epitome of the sophisticated gentleman, except that he's black. Now, what was the reality? Well, this guy was born and brought up in the mean streets of New Jersey, in probably one of the poorest areas along, in the whole northeast of the United States. He effectively had no schooling after the age of 11. Was running with street gangs. He was a career criminal and had multiple convictions and terms in prison for robbery with firearms, threatening people, beating people up, shooting at folks. I mean, we're talking career criminal here. And if you look at how he looked in real life, there's this sort of darkness that hangs over him in the sense of the black cloud type thing. And this guy looks meaner than a rattlesnake, a cut rattlesnake. I mean, you couldn't get a more unpleasant sort of intense glowering than you would from this guy. But he's presented as in the movie as being sort of, again, a very pleasant guy, beautiful smile, amiable, and the sort of guy you'd say, let's have a beer and this sort of thing. So he was nothing like that in real life. Now, in reality, there was a shooting at a bar in somewhere in the northeast United States, and there was one of the witnesses identified. It was a black guy driving such and such a car, and he was in the area, and he had again a fairly a decent criminal record that would have him using firearms and doing that sort of thing. So it was circumstantially it was a decent fit. Now he was let go, then imprisoned, let go, then imprisoned again. I mean, went through the court system twice. As far as I'm concerned, his legal team, was woefully inadequate. They should have asked serious questions and didn't. Things that they should have pursued that would have scuttled the case, in my opinion, weren't touched. It was one of those things where there was a bunch of detectives eager and keen to get a quick conviction. A district attorney standing for election, a mayor that's up for election, somebody who just nicely fits the frame. The witness has said it's a black guy. Here's a guy in the area with a criminal record, and so this was something that was purely circumstantial. But things that happen, for example, the forensics. They didn't do ballistics and forensics tests on this guy, and the detective, the lead detective, said, "Oh, we just didn't have time." What do you mean you didn't have time? I mean, if you're going to potentially put someone in prison, you make fucking time. But for some reason, the defence attorneys just didn't seem to pursue this one. Okay, next question. And so I thought it was a failure all around. The law enforcement authorities failed. The background politics of elections coming up. The defence attorneys were, I thought, very sloppy. And having said that, the prosecution attorneys weren't much good either. Why didn't you do the ballistics? No, I didn't have time. What about the DNA evidence, or what would have been the equivalent of it in the time? Yeah, we just forgot. Very sloppy. Now, to me, the judge should have thrown something like it as, "Hey, bring this guy in to charge him with murder." Should have thrown something like it as, "Hey, bring this guy in to charge him with murder, and you haven't even got the basics of the evidence set up, and you've just got some bullshit circumstance." So I think the judge should have thrown. So there's failures at all levels here, and which brings us back to due legal process. Due legal process is incredibly important in any functioning civis. And here it broke down quite comprehensively. But the movie, in my view, just didn't focus. Whatever breakdowns in the system there were, it was attributed 100% to racism, and it wasn't that. Here's a guy with a long rap sheet. So they depict him as this really sophisticated guy, really just glossed over his previous criminal record as if that was just utterly irrelevant. I mean, he wasn't. He was a street hood. He was a street hood thug who was as dark and mean as they come. But that doesn't mean he committed the crime. And again, this is where due legal process comes in. And people that talk to me about due legal process, who cares? The guy's white and he's straight. Who cares? He's guilty. No. Now you have to say, if you were a judge and somebody says, "Hey, we've just caught Hitler," and he's been charged and he's brought into court, would Hitler be entitled to a fair trial? When I say fair, that it's based on the evidence, based on the facts. You can't say, "Well, hey, Hitler, who cares? Who gives a flying fuck about the evidence? The guy's fucking Hitler. Take him out the back and fucking shoot him. Damn white Nazi, fascist, supreme." No. That's exactly where due legal process is meant to come in. Have you got the facts? Because if you don't have the facts or the evidence, if you haven't got enough to charge him with or to make the charges stick, then as judge in this court, Hitler will walk out there a free man out in the fucking street. And if there's those who want to cause him harm in the street, I will order a fucking police escort. And if you want to put him in prison or you want him to put him on the electric chair, then you bring the fucking evidence into a fucking court of law. And this is what due legal process is about. And that's why it's important. So this movie, I believe, failed utterly and just wanted to turn it into an anti-white rant narrative. But it goes to show, in my view, it goes to show that Hollywood and the globalist machine is sticking absolutely tightly to this narrative of all evil. All white people are evil. Straight white people are extra evil. Straight white people on above average income are super evil, and so on. So sticking to that, but it's created an entire class of black people and young people, by the way, who have been convinced, because they're so fucking stupid, and they're young. Remember, they're young. They're convinced that we're in this miasma, this ocean of anti-black racism perpetrated and inflicted by all these white people, and it's simply not true. Again, I've been around for a long time, and I just don't see this so-called racism. I don't see it anywhere. If I do see it at all, it's blacks hating whites. It's not the other way around. White people that dislike and disapprove of black behaviour or behaviour that blacks typically engage in. But as a black person around that doesn't behave that way, then they don't suffer anything negative. Certainly not that I've known, and I've hired black people. It's not something I'm unaware of. But there you go with this movie, and these propaganda movies, because that's what they are. These propaganda movies are creating, I think, a lot of social division. They're creating hatreds and distrusts and so on where none existed, or they're fanning the flames of those things, assuming they do exist. But maybe a movie about due legal process, the technicalities of the law, maybe that'd be boring to a lot of people. But this fucking propaganda movie, made by propagandists, made by people that hate white Gentiles. Why not talk about that? Why not talk about these activists who are making this movie just to pour hate on white Gentiles, nothing more? Why don't we have a look at that? But it's all one way. And I think we have to realise that a lot of the, Black Lives Matter riots, kids running around the street waving placards, a lot of it comes from this sort of propaganda, which is a complete invention. In this movie, they haven't even bothered to be fucking accurate. If they depicted the black guy as this street hood thug, which is what he was, with a long criminal record, then there'd be very little sympathy for him. If they looked at the reality where the police weren't racist at all, they were just either incompetent or just so keen to get a conviction that they didn't follow the rules, they didn't abide by the law. That would be a thing. But instead, all of that doesn't matter. We're talking damn fascist, Nazi, racist. End of story. And it does all of us, a disservice. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.